Hello, all. Michael Denza is speaking. This is my first video of trying out a few of the whiteboard I've been working with and trying to use them to make an animation, because in this period of changing times whereby COVID-19 has changed us so much more that we need to teach online, I'm trying to bring some creativity into my instructions and the way I teach my students and make sure that they understand the fundamentals of both chemistry and biochemistry, which is my subject area of expertise. In this test video, which is also an educational video because I'm going to teach everything about electron transport chain, I have a couple of videos already. I'm going to be illustrating a type of typical animation and instructing as well on the electron transport chain. Let us take it off immediately from there. You see, I already said the electron transport chain takes place in the mitochondria. In fact, the mitochondria is made up of two membranes. We already said this in most of the class I usually teach in this series and in other biochemistry series, that the mitochondria is made up of an outer membrane and an inner membrane. In between the outer membrane and the inner membrane, there is the intermembrane space. Now, inside the mitochondria itself, which is beyond the inner membrane, is the matrix. The matrix is the gel-like part of the mitochondria that contains the enzymes of the citric acid cycle and the beta oxidation, and that is where this reaction. Now, the electron transport chain is a series of these multi-enzyme proteins that are lined up in this intermembrane space and consist of complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, complex 4. And then complex 5, which is the ATPase or the ATP synthase, is not part of this complex. However, I like discussing these two things together because they are happening at the same time. They are not actually isolated. However, it is important I make it clear that the electron transport chain includes what happens in the 4 complexes and the ability to transfer electrons, whereas what happens in complex 5 is the oxidative phosphorylation. So this is the electron transport itself, and this is the oxidative phosphorylation. This is which is the synthesis of ATP as a result of the transport. Now, I'm going to just my main objective in this class is to illustrate just the electron transport chain and the oxidative phosphorylation straight. So let's take it off from there. Now, the names of these complexes, you can see them in my note already if you've been following part of most of my videos. Complex 1, I'm just going to use the complexes to name them. The part of my job here is not to begin to name their names. But if you, however, want to know their names, you can always find those in most of the textbooks, okay? So, I'm going to start it up immediately. Now, what is happening in the electron transport chain? Like I said, from complex 1, complex 2, complex 3 are aligned or arranged in order of their increasing affinity. So what that simply tells you is that complex 1 has the highest affinity for electrons. So let's see what is happening at this point. Now, NADH and FADH, which are the two reducing equivalents that are generated in citric acid cycle and beta oxidation of fatty acids, make their way, are the sources of these electrons that are being transported by these complexes. So what happens is that NADH comes in complex 1. Now, the engagement of NADH in complex 1 makes it to pump more protons when FADH engages only in complex 2. We're going to see that. So let's see what is happening. In complex 1, NADH plus H. Remember, anytime you see NADH is also having another hydrogen that is floating around to tell you that it carries 2 electrons. 2 hydrogens means it has 2 electrons there. Now, it comes and transfers its electron to complex 1. Yeah, complex 1, like I said, I'm not going to tell you the name that much, but I'm just going to be saying it. Complex 1 is the NADH, the hydrogenase complex. Now, it transfers these electrons from this. Now, what happens? The moment it transfers this electron, these electrons here goes to complex 2, and what complex 2 does is to transfer this electron and gives it to ubiquinone. Ubiquinone is a mobile electron carrier with cytochrome C2, which are both mobile electron carriers that act as intermediate in transporting these electrons between the various complexes. Now, this is what is happening in complex 1 with regards to NADH. Now, the moment NADH transfers the electron to ubiquinone, what happens next is interesting. Now, the transfer of this electron gives it enough energy, enough potential to pump 4 moles of proton into the intermembrane space. So what does it do? It transfers these protons, 4 moles of protons, inside the intermembrane space. This is exactly what is happening in complex 1. Now, what is happening in complex 2? You see, complex 2 is where FADH2 comes in. This is where FADH2 comes in. And again, FADH2 is a carrier of 2 electrons. It comes in and transfers the electrons to complex 2. Again, look at what complex 2. Complex 2 takes those electrons. Let's see what happens there in animation. Complex 2 takes those 2 electrons again. And what happens to it? And gives it... FADH transfers the electron to complex 2. Complex 2 takes these electrons again and give it to ubiquinone or coenzyme Q. Like I said, ubiquinone or coenzyme Q is a mobile electron carrier. We shouldn't forget that at this point. So what it does is to also transfer. So I already have 2 electrons here. It transfers 2 electrons at the same time. I don't want to put this one and make it 4 so that I don't confuse you. But just know that the 2 electrons that are coming from complex 2 and both the 2 electrons that are coming from this guy transfers it from this guy. That's exactly what happens in that process. Now, like I said, the 2 electrons are being carried by coenzyme Q or ubiquinone. Ubiquinone will continue the process. What does ubiquinone do? Now, see what happens before I go to that. Now, complex 2 does not have enough energy to pump proton into the intermembrane space. What it means is that complex 2 pumps 0 hydrogen ions. 0. It pumps just 0 hydrogen ions. It doesn't pump anything in the intermembrane space. You say 0. It doesn't do anything there. It doesn't pump in anything, nothing. It doesn't have energy to do that. In the next thing I'm going to say is that the ubiquinone now, or coenzyme Q, now transfers these 2 electrons to complex 3. Look at what's happening here. So now, again, I take my pointer. These 2 electrons are now being transported and given this guy. The moment you take this electron, what happens next? What happens next is this. Is that it is holding it now. So what it means is that it's going to move it. That it's not going to stay. So complex 3 will now transfer this electron to cytochrome C, which is the mobile electron carrier as well, floating around between the membranes of the mitochondrium. Now what happens? The transfer of this electron gives complex 3 enough energy to do what? To pump 4 moles of proton into the intermembrane space. What does it do? So the transfer of this electron will result to the pumping of 1, pumping of 2, pumping of 3, and pumping of 4 protons into the intermembrane space by complex 3. Now what happens next? The electrons are with complex what? They are with cytochrome C. Now cytochrome C, which is the last mobile electron carrier there, will now transfer this electron to complex 4. Complex 4 is the last electron carrier, but not the last electron acceptor. I usually tell students that it's better. It's usually good for me to distinguish between the two. I'm going to come to that. Now, it takes these 2 electrons and transfers it to what? Complex 4. Complex 4 is called the cytochrome oxidase. What does complex 4 do? Complex 4 has enough energy to pump 2 moles of hydrogen ion or proton into this intermembrane space. Now, what that tells you that in one swoop of electron transport, 10 moles of protons are being pumped into the intermembrane space, which is true. Now, however, as these electrons get here, what does it use these electrons for? It's doing two things. It is pumping two protons into the intermembrane space, and it is also doing what again? It is also transferring two of these protons to oxygen, and it now uses it to reduce oxygen into water molecule. So what the implication of this is that the last receptor of those two moles of electrons is what? Is oxygen, because oxygen accepts those two moles of electron to be reduced as water molecule. This is exactly what we call the electron transport chain. This is where it finishes. Now, what is then the oxidative phosphorylation? Oxidative phosphorylation simply means the making of ATP from ADP and PI. Now, how does it make it? It is made by the complex 5. The complex 5 is called the ATPase or the ATP synthase. Now, look at what is happening here. Now, in one swoop of this transport, in electron transport, there are 10 moles of proton. And remember, the increase in hydrogen ion concentration simply means increase what? In pH. Simply means what? Decrease in pH. And when the pH of a solution decreases, what happens? It becomes highly acidic. So the increase in hydrogen ion concentration or the decrease in pH now begins to be observed inside the intermembrane space. The resultant effect is that the significant drop what? In the pH of the intermembrane space, or the increase in hydrogen ion of the intermembrane space. What happens? The protons here now get so much that there will be a strong osmotic difference between the concentration of hydrogen ions in the intermembrane space and in the matrix. That difference in hydrogen ion concentration will result to the transport or the leaking of these hydrogen ions that were here back into the gel to equilibrate. Remember what is osmosis? Movement of what? Molecules or ions or whatever from region of high concentration to region of low concentration. That's exactly through a semi-permeable membrane. The membrane is a semi-permeable. So what is going to happen is that as this builds up at a point, these hydrogen ions need to start getting back. And as they're getting back, that difference in potential again generates enough energy for this complex 5 to what? Synthesize ATP from ADP and PI. And what happens? These hydrogen ions, because, okay, I'm going to get my pointer. These hydrogen ions will now begin to leak back through this channel back into this. As they begin to leak back, that energy in leaking back now result to the spinning of this portion of the complex 5, and that spinning generates enough energy to synthesize ATP. That particular process is what we call oxidative phosphorylation. That is exactly what we call it. And because these two things are happening at the same time, so the transport of these electrons is coupled to the synthesis of ATP. That is why we say electron transport chain is coupled to oxidative phosphorylation. And having said that, we've come to the end of this lecture. Thank you for listening. Bye.